We're going to go through the InDesign document setup for this ad assignment that is specified to be 8.5 by 11 with a live area of 7 by 9.5 inches. And we'll talk a bit about what that live area is in a moment, but what we're going to do is actually set the margins to designate that live area. So just looking at this sample ad that's already in InDesign, this is a little smaller than 8.5 by 11. It's 8 3/8 by 10 7/8, so just 1/8 of an inch smaller on each dimension. And what the live area is specifying is not the trim of the ad. I'm just going to press W here to get my working mode back. And the trim of the ad is at the page edge. Right now we can see this background image going to the bleed guide. So that is extending right out to the bleed. And the live area is actually what we designate as the space that content, typewritten content, logos, anything other than a background or background image has to reside in, has to actually stay within. So this one is by default set to a 1/2 inch margin. We can see this content is exceeding that just a little bit, but we would designate the live area on this one really at a 1/2 inch. And mainly it's just keeping the type away from the edges of the page, just keeping that airspace around it. But we're going to be a little more specific in our document setup by setting that actual 7 by 9 area. So we're going to go New Document, go Command N or File and New Document. And regardless of what tab you have here, you may have various tabs that you go to. You can set it to letter, but we're just going to go right over here and set the units to inches. We're going to do this all manually. And it's already, since it's on letter, it's already showing 8.5 by 11. But if you have something else, you just want to make sure that your width is set to 8.5 and your height is set to 11. And you're going to do your orientation at portrait. And in this one, since we're doing a single page ad, we're going to turn facing pages off. This is not a spread, it's not a multi-page document that would be bound, so we'll turn facing pages off. And if you're a student doing this, you may have to cite any content that you've used. So for my students that are doing this ad, you probably want to add a second page that you can put your citations on. For example, if you're getting imagery from Pexels.com or another stock photography site, or if you're citing any content, etc. You don't really want to litter your ad space with that, but remember we do have to put the citations in the actual document. So we're going to put in pages, we'll put 2, and that will give you a second page where you can just put that those citations, and you don't have to worry about littering your ad space with it. So we've got an 8.5 by 11 portrait setup, portrait orientation, 2 pages, and we're going to go down here to the margins. Margins typically default to 1/2 inch. We're going to set ours a little differently to accommodate that 7 by 9 live area space. So the first thing I'm going to do is deselect the link, because when that is selected, we know that when we set one, they all react the same. We're going to deselect that. And doing a little bit of quick math, 8.5 by 11 with a 7 by 9 space inside of it, we want to get that margin equal. So 8.5 minus 7, 7 being the width of that live space, that leaves us with 1.5 inches. And we're going to divide that by 2 so that we get equal margin left and right. So we're going to do on the left and right margins, we're going to do 0.75, which is half of that 1.5 left when we subtract 7 from 8.5. So we have 0.75 margins left and right. That's going to designate our 7 inches of live area on the width. And then on the top and bottom, we have 11 inches. That's the height of our ad. The live area being 9, that's 11 minus 9 is 2, and that leaves us with 1 inch on the top that we'll designate and 1 inch on the bottom. Okay, so we've got differing margins here. We have the top and bottom at 1 inch, left and right each at 0.75. And remember, when you are working with InDesign, you always have that preview button. Most functions where we have to open a window will show preview, and that's great to do so that we can see what we're actually going to get once we click create. So we can see here we have our trim, that's our 8.5 by 11 inch page, and we have our margin, and the margin is set to 7 by 9 and it's centered on the page. Now the reason we're doing designating the live area with the margins is just to really get it set into the document. We can do it any number of ways. We could bring out guides. Once you open the document, you could set your guides to that space. But since we know we need a specific live area on this ad, it really is best just to utilize the margins, and then we don't have another guide with margins at 1/2 inch, and then we're designating live area, maybe using our guides, and it can just get a little busy and confusing. So it's just really more efficient and easier to work when we've got that single guide with the margin set to what will be that live space. And then we're going to set the bleed. So this document is going to have a standard bleed of 1/8 of an inch, which is 0.125 inches when we convert it to decimal. So we're just going to do one click up on those. We've left that link selected. So there's our document setup. We've got the bleed. We don't have to worry about slug. So once again, it's an 8.5 by 11 portrait orientation. We're doing 2 pages here in case you need a citations page. Typically in real world, you don't have to worry about that. It's an ad. So school purposes, we often just add that extra page for our citation content. Don't worry about the columns. You can leave that as it is. And going down to the margins, we have the top margin at 1, the bottom margin at 1, the left and right each at 0.75, which is 3/4 of an inch. And then we have our bleed set to the standard bleed of 1/8 of an inch. And we can see in our preview all of that showing. So we'll say create. And there we go. We've got our document set up. So remember that the live area that we've designated, this here, this 7 by 9, any typewritten content, any logos, even any administrative content, if there's copyright or anything, that would stay within this space. However, your imagery, your background, any design elements, they can exceed that. And then if you're doing an image that goes to the page edge that you would want trimmed and actually set to the page edge, you would of course take that all the way to the bleed.